What's up, everybody? I am your host, Aseer the Radio-Aseer, along with my co-host, Selena, 10,000 years or more, Saga Assad, as well as you, wonderful superhero family. Thank you again for tuning in and coming through with us once again. I want to say peace, blessings to you all. I hope you guys can hear me. Make sure on this full moon in Cancer, everybody in the chat for holding us down, thank you. Please let me know if you hear me loud and clear. I need to turn thing up. You can turn it up right there. Okay. Please let me know. It's all good. Everybody hear me? I hope so. Great. Thank you. That's all I need to know. Sounding good. So definitely, as we are into the first week of the Gregorian year, of the Gregorian New Year, I hope everybody had a great and wonderful day. That is D-E-Y. I hope everybody who is anybody is doing exactly what it is they feel they need to do or is doing what they're supposed to do. And for those of us that ain't, I pray that you get your stuff together. And also, anybody and everybody who may have lost an emissary or loved one or partner or anything within the past couple or whatever, definitely want to send our condolences and definitely send you love and light and wish them peaceful journey. So, as you know, as we always do, we get into it from the streets to the Stella and from the Stella to the streets. So, one of the big things that came down is your man Ron Paul wound up coming in third place, which is really good for him because he usually comes in like 7th, 10th, you know what I mean? Even though he is the most politically viable, he's a loose cannon in a sense because he don't have a handler, a direct handler himself. His handler is more coming from the actual cabal more than from a specific individual programmer or controller. So he's somewhat rogue in that way, which is why he talks a lot of the stuff that he be talking, you know what I'm saying? But specifically speaking, it's pretty much a wrap for him. It looks like they're going to go with the Mormon. But the country ain't going to vote for no Mormon because most people still don't even understand what the hell that is. And most of us don't even know the connection that has with the Moors and so have you, but that's another story. But specifically speaking, you heard it here first. I think that there's another agenda afoot. I think that they know that they really don't have anybody to beat the guy that's sitting in the seat now. They've already accepted that. So in the event of that acceptance, of course, there has to be a situation where they have a contingency. So what I feel they're going to do, and this is just, again, my opinion based upon the data mining research that we've been doing in terms of the connection between political elections and solar flares and solar winds. But in that, what I think they're going to do is they're going to work to take over the Senate. They know they can't win the seat. So what they'll do is they'll go to push a run on the Senate seats and then lock the Senate down in that sense, and then basically veto anything or try to veto anything that he want to pass. So I think the angle is to stress him even more, create a more stressful situation in which they now can basically get in the Senate, and then they can start to push forth whatever other bills they're trying to do. Because now that the Tea Party is merging with what they call the Progressive and Independent Party, you're going to see the convergence of a lot of political spinning trying to create a vacuum in which they could potentially get somebody into a position that they can eventually have influence in the new Congress. Because the Congress of 2013 is going to be a whole nother thing if Congress even exists by that point. So that's on one level. So that's what the G is with that. That's why they're not too concerned with Romney. And because they got Kane out of the way, you see, to tell you the truth, in my opinion, he was the only one who may have had a chance. because the people was really feeling him until they Tiger Woods them. You know what I'm saying? So he was a G in a sense because he really was using that. He allowed himself to get put in that position really to sell that book because that's really what he did. He merged his book tour and never announced that he was going to run for president, but basically put it out there that he would if he got enough votes. So all of the campaign spots that he was doing was actually his book signing. See what I'm saying? And he never formally casted his vote in to be that, even though he was a part of the actual debate. You also might see at the last minute a Palin snafu where they try to inject something with her based upon something that went down with that girl Bachman, who was also programmed by the same person programmed Palin, who was Henry Kissinger. One of what they call the Hawk of Washington. So, again, we always deal with the material stuff before we take it to the stellar stuff. So, another material thing that's going down is this thing in, like I said, Nigeria is really getting stupid. They're not reporting a lot of the skirmishes and stuff that's going on, but it's starting to heat up. And like we said, this is all basically in retaliation of what happened with Cheney, but this is also part of the whole negative karma that's being built up by those people of the Nigerian nation who have been engaged in these worldwide scams that have been literally bankrupting millions upon millions of people. Now, I'm all about niggas coming up, but when you try to get, when you going majority after, black people, and then the few white people you're getting, you're not even really hitting them, it says something. You know what I'm saying? But specifically speaking now, these are all being used, these incidences are being used as a means in which the European Union is seeking to basically isolate the vote and kind of like make Nigeria responsible to pay back, trying to make the Nigerian government / people responsible for the scams that some people in Nigeria is running, because some of them is so ill. You know what I mean? They really going hard. So the United States is trying to use this as a means to broker or couch the true agenda, which is to get into Nigeria, basically to seal up some of the oil they got up in there, just in case they got to commit to a further stint in terms of the war in Africa. Because the war against the United States and China is going to be played out in Africa, because that's what's been going on now. We've been detailing this over the past 2 years, I think, really the past year and a half, about how a lot of the fights that are going on in Africa, especially the genocidal stuff, is really just a window dressing to kick the Chinese out. United States does not want, United States, UK, and France do not want them in Africa, Chinese. So they are doing things implicitly to stop that. Another thing that's going on is that the Chinese are starting to invest. See, the difference between the Chinese and the Anglo governments is that the Chinese is not just trying to just give them money, buy them cars and gifts and stuff. The Chinese is actually investing in the substrata or the subculture of the nation, African nations that they're dealing with. So there's a whole thing of Shaolin monks who made a big thing. They talked about it, and they said that they was leaving because they needed to go back to the land of where Bodhidharma ancestors came from, and they needed to bring the Shaolin arts back to their descendants. Now, they know that Bodhidharma is the founder of all, basically, modern martial arts that came into what they call China. He is the black man with the thick woolly hair and all of that, who walked, the Dravidian black man who walked from the tip of Sambo, Judasia at the time, let's call it Southeast Asia, and walked into China. And basically, all along the way, observed all the animals that he observed and mimicked their style, and they created the different tiger, crane, and all that stuff, and eventually led up to Shaolin. So now the Shaolin monks is now in Africa teaching African orphans Shaolin technique. So, again, this all goes back to the prophecy of the killer bees, the Africanized bees, right, being incited in Africa by what they call the Asian influence. That's what they were saying when we were waiting for the killer bees a couple of years ago. So in retaliation of that, so the Chinese is doing shit like that. They're also, in certain parts, trying to, like, they have their little Chinatown, but what's funny about the African Chinatowns is that, depending, I guess, what country, because I'm not saying like they practicing the same policy in every country. I'm just saying that in certain countries, they're a lot more invested in the long-term relationship. You know what I'm saying? More than they are the immediate benefit of what they get in terms of out the ground, whether it's the oil or whatever. So, you know, that's going down. So they're dealing with that. The other thing is, based upon that whole thing, they're trying to basically turn Africa into the place of what they call genocidal austerity, which is basically the battlegrounds for the new world wars and stuff. A lot of them is going to take place in the so-called African continent. But in my opinion, they're going to deal and take place more in the coastal areas and more, I'll do it, more, okay. They will be doing this more in the coastal areas as well as the so-called Arab states. Okay. So based on that, you know, we have to ask ourselves, well, how is this going to play out with, you know, the different religious wars and stuff they pop in? Because remember, this apocalypse is supposed to be like the battle royal. It's supposed to be the war of all wars. So they're supposed to have the war aspect. They're supposed to have the racial aspect. They're supposed to have the financial aspect. So that's what all of these ducks is kind of lining up for. So case in point, a lot of this is hinging on this Iranian thing. The Iranian thing, really, if we really want to do the history, the Iranian thing, or the problem with Iran, really doesn't begin with Iran. It actually begins with Iraq. And the Iranian issue really goes back to a faction of Arabic or Arab Nazis. These are the same Nazis influenced Arabs that are basically killing a lot of the original people in Libya and are starting to call out for some of the Tawny or fair Arab imams are calling out for fatwas against the darker skin, what they call sons of Ham or whatever. And this, again, is all in retaliation based upon the connection with the Arabs and the Nazis. Now, I don't know if anybody ever heard of this before, but to get into it historically, to bring you up to speed as to why the situation is where it is right now, foreign policy-wise, this goes back to, well, there's a book you can get called, one second, I got it. Yeah, there's a book you can get called Churchill's Folly. And it's all about how Winston Churchill basically created Iraq. But he didn't just do it by himself. It was him, T.E. Lawrence, a.k.a. Lawrence of Arabia, and a woman named, I think, Francesca or Franny or something, something like that, Bell. Her last name was Bell. And she's the one that actually carved it out. To go back into history, after, let's say, going back to when the Ottoman Empire was falling, we're talking towards the end of the 1800s, early 1900s. So let's say between 1881 1914, which is, according to Elijah Muhammad, the calculated end of the devil civilization. Going back to that point, these guys who were the British were basically trying to defeat the last of the Turks, because the Turks had been running things for the past 300 some odd years after the Moors fell. So the Moors fell, the Turks came, the mystic Turks came up, the mystic Turks fell, the Turks came up, they fell, then the British came up. So in the process of this, what they decided to do is go to the Bedouin tribes, or the so-called Arab, because the word Arab didn't exist then. They went to them and asked them to help them fight and keep the Turks out of what they called Arabia, or what they were referring to at that time now as the Middle East. Back then, they referred to it as Africa. Okay? And the Arabs themselves did not call themselves Arabs, like I said, because that word was invented by T.E. Lawrence. So they did not call themselves that. They called themselves whatever the tribal definition of themselves was, based upon whatever group or homogenous family clan they came from. But unilaterally, a lot of them had a Bedouin influence, and the ones that didn't, if we were in biblical times, these Arab people, they would refer to them as the Philistines. So these Philistinian descendants or whatever, who are now being conned into believing that they're Arab, believe that T.E. Lawrence is their savior because he fought with them against the Turks, and they're basically pushing them out. So the object was that they was going to push them out, and then what would happen was that the Arabs would then get their own states. So sure enough, they pushed them all out, but once they did that, they got the Turks out, but then, of course, the British screwed everybody and only gave certain people states. One of those people was Saudi Arabia, or the House of Saud, because the House of Saud back then, at that time, were descended from Andalusian, Cordobian Moors, as well as Malian Moors influence that had intermarried, going all the way back to the campaign to put us back in power in Spain. So we're going all the way back to, let's say, the 1400s. So by this time now, these so-called Arab races and these Arab groups get together, and they decide that they're going to help the British do this. The British screwed them over, of course, and in that, they only start to really revolve around the House of Saud at the time under Faisal. Faisal was a so-called Tawny Arab or whatever, but again, he descended from one of those Grand Moors who married into one of the white folk and basically breached out the family prior to them getting kicked out of Spain. So he basically was the one used by the British. So what the British did was basically turn him into the puppet king over everybody else. And because Faisal was half Saudi as well, they decided to follow him. So what they did was they propped him up. The British monarchy propped him up as king. Okay. Now, you know, anytime you have a king situation and you're dealing with people who are Islamic, there's a Hebrew influence connected to that. So in that, Faisal and them is really like Islamic Hebrews to a degree. But because they was messing with the British, Faisal even went to school. They even sent him to school in Britain. So this created a backlash amongst Arab men and youth that was coming up in the game and was feeling like they was exploited. So what they decided to do was start a movement. So somehow or another, somebody caught wind of what was going on. So now we're moving from, let's say, 1914 now, where the British has now established itself as the empire that has now taken over all of the Turkish Empire territories. And then what they did was started splitting up, creating little fiefdoms. But what they did was they pit all of the Arabs against each other based on tribal basis, and then used the British as to be the pseudo-mediators of the conflicts, whatever they would be, all to preserve the oil. All to preserve the oil. So essentially, this deteriorated into a point where once Faisal took over, they needed to find a country to be able to set these things up. So there were 3 different countries that had been in a tribal war ever since the fall of the Turkish Empire. And it was a war that was going on between the Shias the Kurds, the Shias, the Shiites, the Kurds, the Sunnis, and the Beys in them that was still receiving tribute from some of these so-called Arabs who were connected to El Gawi Pasha and the Moors that was further east, like in Mali and everything else. So what they decided to do was take these three places and make them into one country. So Mosul, Baghdad, and Basra become Iraq. All of this was then laid out by Winston Churchill, himself a Druid in real life through the knowledge. There's pictures of him in his Druid gear. He was a Druid. He was also a Scottish Rite. And he was accompanied by one of the lovers of Aleister Crowley, this chick named Belle, and T.E. Lawrence of Arabia, was the one who basically was the bagman who made the deal for all of them. So Churchill, Bell, and Lawrence basically created the term Arab and started carving up all of the Arab states into what they would be today. But through favoritism and the British practice of using one monarchy against the other, it became an issue. So by around the time of the around 1920 to about 1933, in America, you have the eugenics thing popping, but you also have the rise of the Nazi Party. It starts in Long Island, and then they move it to Germany, in which they create a false flag thing where they burn down the Reichstag, and then which is the German Chancellor building, and that's when the Germans take over, kind of like what they do in 9/11. So in that, the Nazis then take over, and then they start to charge the German people money for the political party and the technological advances they started to bring the country. In this now, the Nazi thing with all of the flags and all of that started to inspire the rest of the Arabs in the Middle East. And so they started having rallies and all of that with flags and all of that too. One of the main ones was a guy named Al-Farouk. And Al-Farouk was at one time the student of a guy named Sheikh Deuce Mohammed. Sheikh Deuce Mohammed was the one who basically was one of the teachers of Fard and them and brought them over here to bring Islam back to the original man. But Sheikh Deuce Mohammed kicked Al-Farouk out of his tutelage due to the fact that Al-Farouk was on some, Arab supremacy shit. So Al-Farouk bounces from Iraq, goes to Syria. He stays in Syria for a while, and in Syria he decides to come up with an Arabic version of the Nazi Party. This became known as the Ba'ath, or the Ba'athist Party. Ba'ath, or Ba'athist, or Ba'ath in Arabic means resurrection. So they were going to use this as a nationalistic identity in order for the people to move up into the strata of the Arabic people to move up and basically rise against the colonial powers. So in that, analogous to him, there was another guy they referred to as the Grand Mufti. The Grand Mufti was not even Arab. He was a straight white guy, Caucasian. But he had a lot of sway in the Arabic world. So between Al-Farouk and this dude, the Grand Mufti, the whole thing became a big issue, especially when Hitler started talking that shit about the Jews and getting rid of all of the Jews. This appealed to the Arabs because they, Arabs hate the Jews. So they was like, we need to mess with them. So the Grand Mufti wound up sending word to the consul in the German consul in Egypt that he would meet with him. They met after they were introduced to through by Al-Farouk. Al-Farouk introduces the Grand Mufti to the dude. They hook up. The Germans is like, cool, we want to do it, but we too caught up on what we got to do over here in Poland, because they had just invaded France. They were just invading France, I think, at the time. So they said, well, we can't really flock with you now, but we'll look out if we can. So what Al-Farouk decided, what the Grand Mufti decided to do was make himself more known by getting the Arabs to rise up against the British in Iraq, in which this would impress the Germans enough for the Germans to come and bring them some bread. So then they say, cool, we do it. But they didn't depend on the British Air Force coming in and basically handing them their hat. So that failed. So in the process of that, the British started clamping in their tentacles around Iraq even more, and then installed Faisal's son. Right? So another Arab now, king, fake puppet king, schooled in Europe, in England. They break this whole thing down. The whole thing starts popping. Then the Allied thing starts to happen with Mussolini. But the reason why Hitler didn't want to mess with the Mufti in that sense was that he felt between the deal with him and Mussolini was that Mussolini would take care of the Arabs, you know what I'm saying, and he would deal with the Asians. See what I'm saying? Because remember, Japan was an ally of Germany during the whole thing. So that's why he didn't want to mess with him. But Mussolini started getting into so much shit that it was a wrap. So by the time 1934 comes around, let's say, there's a guy that Hitler commits to the conflict who has to make a deal with the Moor, El Ghawi Pasha, who was ruling Morocco at the time. Some people try to act like he was a puppet of the French, but that's not true. They actually all was paying him tribute. Rommel, who they call the Desert Fox, when you read about him, when you read about the war and stuff, Rommel was the dude. He started kicking the British ass all up and down Tunisia, Algeria, Morocco, Egypt, to the point where the British was really scared. They didn't know what they was going to do. So in that galvanized the rebellion in Iraq, and they tried to pop it off again. Didn't work. So the Mufti now got a price on his head. He goes to Germany. He goes to Germany and then starts recruiting, meets with Hitler through Himmler. Himmler makes him a general. Himmler now commissions him to set up an Islamic corps of Nazis comprised of Muslim Nazis from Bosnia, well, it wasn't Bosnia then, Hungary, Bulgaria, and places like that. They create the first Nazi Muslim corps. The Nazi Muslims start going into the fight, and the Mufti is called the something. He basically made him like a governor general. So the plan was to send him back with this battalion. They'll take over Iraq. Iraq now is where the Gulf is, and then now Germany now rules the Gulf, moves the Middle East, and they'll start moving north to then push the British and the United States out. This would have been all well and good, but by 1944, everything started going south, and Hitler winds up, going in. So as everything starts to spiral down, the Grand Mufti decides that he has to do something else. So he bounces again, right, and winds up in Libya, starts recruiting in Libya. So, again, this is a Nazi. This is a Muslim Nazi who is posing as an Arab, who is going to Arabic countries, preaching against the Jews. The only thing worse, he wrote a treatise called The Only Thing Worse Than Iranians and Jews is Flies. And this became like a big thing in the Arabic world. And everybody started going in on this. And this became like the basis of what the premise of Arabic nationalism was going to be. So in a Nazi faction situation, women have no real rights like that. They're just used as breeding capacity for things like that. So this was comparable to what the Arab situation was under the Sunni principle, you see. So the Nazi thing was kind of like they could marry it. Now, this don't mean that every Arab at the time was a Nazi. This don't mean that everybody understood it in this way or where this stuff came from. But this is the beginning and origins and the behavior that set up the war that we're in right now. So while all of this is going on, Churchill is besieged by the Japanese prime minister, because they was actually trying to get the United States to broker a deal between Japan and China, and then they would give up whatever oil field, the Dutch East India oil fields that they had conquered during the Japanese expansion. So because the party was split, you had half the party wanted to fight, the other party wanted to have peace. So they sent this in thing. Churchill or whatever was supposed to get FDR in on it. FDR found out about it. Franklin Delano Roosevelt found out about it not too late, but he found out about it, but didn't pursue the peace. So the guy in Japan who was going to make everything cool winds up getting voted out of office. The war people come in, and Pearl Harbor gets bombed. The United States is entered into the war, but they could have went around that. But of course, whatever. So back in Syria now, the Ba'athist Party by the 50s has now come up through the guy Al-Farouk, the same Al-Farouk who introduced the Grand Mufti to the German dude who introduced him to Hitler. Al-Farouk now, who's running the Ba'ath Party, is the president of that, and is basically working to expand it. So now it's basically in all of the countries in the Middle East, and it's attracting all these Arabic young men. But it still has this underground fascist Nazi influence. Around this time, there was a guy named Al-Tafur, and Al-Tafur started to run the Ba'ath Party in Iraq. He gets arrested, locked up, but when he gets out, people look at him as a hero. He winds up meeting Al-Farouk. Al-Farouk puts him on. He becomes the head of the education in Iraq, and then his nephew starts to enter into the party. His nephew was a guy named Saddam Hussein, and then Saddam Hussein, Al-Farouk's nephew, the other guy's nephew, hooks him up with Al-Farouk. They go to Syria. From Syria, he goes to Egypt. In Egypt, he marries his first cousin, his uncle, the same dude who put him in the party, his daughter. He marries his first cousin. They have two sons, Uday and Qusay, right? And they then, around that time is when allegedly he gets hooked up with the U.S. through CIA, and that's when he gets into Iraq and basically has a coup to kill the guy that he helped kill other guys to put in office. And then he runs it, and now the rest is then history. So, again, what we're saying then is that the Nazi element that is still functioning, because the banks and the holders of the instruments, meaning the notes that were seized during all of these different revolutions, are all in Europe. Coincidentally, a lot of them are some of the same banks that had to get bailed out through the stimulus and subprime thing. This is why Prescott Bush got indicted during the whole fiasco with the Trading with the Enemy Act thing. And then in the process, to protect the United States from this in the future, they decided to come up with the military-industrial complex, which really was just a bunch of Nazis anyway, who had been expatriated, brought back to the United States, and put into the population through Operation Paperclip. So, in the end, what led to the total destabilization of everything was when the United States wanted to move on Iran. They started with the embargoes, and that inevitably led to World War II. That and the killing of Archduke Ferdinand, who coincidentally had the controlling interest in the oil, the potential oil or whatever was going to be made through whatever deal he was trying to make with Iran. And this is in like 33.
He has no paper in front of him. He is sitting on the bed, drinking a glass of red wine, just going in. It's crazy to watch this dude sometimes. I'm like, how do you remember all this? Where are you storing it? Because I've read it, but I don't remember it like this. Thank you, Full Moon in Cancer. Thank you. Thank you, Aseer. Ashe.
Ashe, babe. Yeah, it basically is a full circle thing now. So everything that wasn't paid for during this period of what I'm talking about with the rise of Arabic Nazism coincided with the rise of actual Nazism in Europe. But all of that had its origins through the eugenics programs that were shared with the German and the United States government leading up to World War II.
Okay, he has 5 Post-its with just like points on them, but no other things.
You know what I mean? So they created a situation where they have different functionaries that inherit the same problem, but they classify it under a different operation. So Operation High Jump, which was about them going into Antarctica and doing their stuff up there, was also connected to the John Lennon killing. Because what happens is they start these programs, and then when they screw up, whenever they say they're going to shut them down altogether, that just means that they're transferring the jurisdiction of the program to another agency. But the only agencies that are part of the quote-unquote United States government are the agencies that say the United States government, you know what I mean, or United States federal government. But see, they'll use a term like federal in Federal Reserve and make you think that it's talking about that it's connected to the government, and it's not. It's just a federalized system. So this is also now in these racist Libyan death squad groups. All of these are Ba'athist connected. Al-Qaeda is also a Ba'athist network. Because after the first revolution in which the monarchy was overthrown in Iraq, where they killed Faisal and they killed his son, the guy that took over, he was kind of a communist. So to some Arabs, communists were just as bad as Jews, you know what I'm saying? Because they were connected to the Russians. So that was a problem as well. So once they got rid of him, there was really nobody else that could come up. So when Saddam came in, he basically came in as the thug that was willing to kill everybody. This dude was so ill in terms of the terror that he was putting in people. When he got inaugurated as president, when they was having the Grand Assembly where everybody from all over the country comes in to recognize him as that, he turned the whole shit into a mock trial. And out of the 200 people, like 100 of them, he ordered, like basically made this seem sequestered and made it seem like they was conspiring to get rid of him. But so emotionally, so he killed all these people. But the thing is, these are the people he killed were the people who voted against him becoming president the first time. So it's like everybody who didn't, that he went to look out for him to get nominated. When he didn't get nominated, he basically held that grudge, and then when he finally did become president, he had all them people killed. and then started having other people killed because he had to set up the secret police. Oh, yeah, that's right, Queen. He had other people in the assembly kill them to show their loyalty to him. This is the type of mind control and terror that he was instilling in these people, and that all of these arrogant people came up in due to them all coming up under Nazi influence programming. That's how the Nazis ran their shit. That's how Yakub ran their stuff. You know what I'm saying? So the draconian aspect of control over the physical reality and the minds of people manifested in this ideology that fused itself into the actual religion of Islam, which then led to the eventual creation of what we now today call Islamic fundamentalism. Right, but in America, Islam was prominent in the continent, and then it was like absent for, let's say, 250 years. Then it started to manifest, kind of like within the sphere of our influence around this time when you had a lot of black people coming into the knowledge of Islam. But up until that point, like I said, when people like Deuce Muhammad, peace be upon him, Noble Joe Ali, Marcus Garvey, up until them people started coming in and dropping stuff, most of the black people had been put through the whole Manifest Destiny, Willie Lynch, Negro, Dred Scott redesignation thing by the new quote-unquote overlords who used to be the slaves. So they had already adopted the Christian aspect of it, you know what I'm saying? And then within that, the Islam thing was kind of kept from them. So when the prophecy was due that this Islam would start to come back and be reawakened in us, the soothsayers in the quote-unquote Anglo establishment and their little covens or whatever started to do things to thwart that sort of black consciousness from awakening, which is why the mandate for the FBI, again, is to stop the rise of the black messiah. You see what I'm saying? Not to gather information. Like, that's what they do. The FBI is like the federal cops. However, they are cops. You see what I'm saying? And because of that, they function kind of on that super cop level. You see what I'm saying? So that's not necessarily military intelligence. That's not necessarily clandestine intelligence. That's RoboCop. That's hard, like detective work. You know what I'm saying? Which is then broached or bridged with ATF and DOJ. But all of those things, like I said, are different agencies that are really factoring the same cases that have been on the books since these organizations were set up. You see what I'm saying? So it's not like they dealing with anything new, because most of the crimes and stuff that's perpetuated, especially the serial killing and all that stuff, if you look at the time mock-up when these things started occurring, you see, these things coincide with the time that you started to have a mass influx of these paperclip people into the New World through the whole immigration thing and all of that. Ellis Island, Governor's Island, Randall's Island. So they was doing experiments on different people coming in from places. Cross-matching blood types, all of that type of stuff. You know? So, yeah, so they're dealing with that. Then, to compound that, the sealing of the breach, if you will, that was to come was when you had an outreach of people like Gaddafi and certain other people like from the House of Saud or whatever reaching out to Moors or conscious Islamic black men here in America, like the whole thing with Gaddafi in Libya, or when Gaddafi was going to fund the El Rukns, you know, or when Kenyatta was going to get money from the House of Saud to help fund the Mau Mau and all of that. Because most of these people, especially these Arab families, they know that not even 85 years ago, most of their relatives were dark as us. So this racial jihad thing, the whole thing that went down with the Janjaweed in the Sudan and all of that is Nazi influence, propaganda, and radical forced population movement, all learned during this Nazi period. Because the real goal, there was towards the end of World War II, there was a thing where one of Hitler's top people tried to go meet Churchill because they was trying to sue peace before the Allied forces ran on Germany or Berlin. So they were trying to sue for peace to stop them from going into Germany, and then what was going to happen was the Germans, the Americans, and the whoever else, the French, and the everybody else was then all going to run on Russia. That was going to be the deal. And because of that was the problem, because Stalin and the United States and Russia was uneasy allies in that aspect anyway. Even though they both was being funded by the same people, they were still pit against each other. So Stalin didn't really trust the United States being that close with army and stuff like that, because then they could just turn around and just hit Russia. And Russia was already weak based upon what Germany had instilled on it in the days prior to the battles. So it was like, yo, well, we can't go that far, so we just going to just lock Germany down, and then what we're going to do is we're going to take all the technology and biological weaponry and stuff and then divvy that up amongst us. And then we're going to put sanctions on them and have a mock trial for the ones that's not really important, and then the real ones we're going to divvy up. So it then became about who was going to get what scientists and who was going to do what, and that created beef. And because Russia knew that the United States kind of wanted to make moves like that, that created an uneasy peace that created the Cold War that started in 1950 to 1985 when the wall came down. And then that created the soft war that started from, let's say, 1986 to 2000. And now that created the surveillance war, psychological war on earth, war on terror, that started from 2000 to now. So now they want to culminate all of this and tie this up into one big bow for December 21st, 2012, to be able to link their actions up with some prophecy that really has nothing to do with them as people, but more with them as the overall dissolution of their paradigm. This was done further back in history as well, when you had this is also done in history as well, when the original Quran was taken, and the Philistinic people, a.k.a. the so-called Arabic people, created a version of it for themselves. And then during the Crusades, being that they were, let's say, the odd men out, them and the white Christian Templars, who they were in league with, they agreed to recognize each other as the true religion. So even though I don't mess with you, Arab, you are practicing Islam, so I'm going to say that your Islam is orthodox. And then you, Arab, don't like me as a white man or a Christian, but because we are both being oppressed by the same people, we are going to recognize each other and by subterfuge eventually get to the point where we can then dominate and instill what we want over them, and then we can deal with our issues. And that's where we are right now. It was a guy named Ikhwani Muslawun, MUSLIMUWN. And he was a part of a thing called the Muslimat. The Muslimat. MUSAYLIMAT. And they used to call him a liar, you know. He was like Flavius Josephus. He was like a Jew, you know, scholar or whatever, and a Jesuit under Pope Augustine. And in that, they used him as a means to recreate the image of the prophet as what the Arabs needed it to be. The same way that the image of God in the form of the original man, original woman, Black Madonna, Black Child, Saint Maurice, Saint Corvinus, what have you, was used, and then Caucasian people were allowed to then have a God created in their own image, because up to then all of the gods was black in terms of phenotypically and the people administering the knowledge about God and spirituality at that time. So as they were just coming up again from maybe a serfdom position, they were at the whim of whoever was going to give them whatever knowledge. So they rallied behind this guy. And then that, again, fueled the Arabic side, and this is when you get these Arabic, specifically people. Because remember, Arabic is a term that did not manifest really till 1914. So to get into what they were, you know, a lot of these people would be Sabaeans or Nabateans. You know, again, both places today would be known as Yemen, you know, and both of those were Abyssinian colonies, the queens of Sheba. All of these Arabic men or Philistinic men, after the fall of Jerusalem and all of that, were all under the jurisdiction of these original women. And they were worshiping the moon goddess, Alat or Alayat, or the feminine aspect of what they perceived Allah to be. And then Allah was just at the time one of the deities that was in the Kaaba, because it was 365 of them. So again, these are the legends, right, and the myths and the stories that cement what people have identified as history. So in that now, people have then taken that and usurped the universal aspect of that and have applied it to themselves culturally, you know what I mean, and at the expense of the truth. That's why Moses used to say, Elijah Muhammad used to say, read the Quran translated by Yusuf Ali. So that's the best one in terms of us as original people, you know. So when all of these things started to converge in terms of the reality of what the future outcome of these wars were going to turn into, it became important for them to keep accurate records of it for themselves, so that way at least they could start to piece some of it up. Because remember, each agency works against the other, and then they all work for the whole. But then half of them don't know how deep it go, or don't want to believe how deep it go, and then the other half know how deep it go and don't care how that affects everybody else. So it's a natural confliction, but it's created now a system where they are now internally fighting. You know, the whole underground, all the dumbs that started getting blown up with nuclear bombs, dumb standing for deep underground military bases. All of them get blown up, and then blaming it on forest fires, the earthquakes. You go online and see the one where they had the people in a ball game and heard the venting system go off when they had to let out the exhaust from the blast in the ball game. People are like, "What's that? Sounds like wind or sounds unearthly." You know what I'm saying? And again, they don't know, but we do. But we would talk about this for how long? But the story is they don't know who's doing it. They got so many, because allegedly CIA is moving everything out of Langley to Denver, to the Denver airport. So there's a tunnel system that goes directly from Langley to there. And in the process of moving all of this data stuff or whatever, this is when these things went off. So this looks like to me, as you know, somebody's an outsider who believes stuff like this happens, to believe that it was a direct attack on them. Why would they blow up their own stuff? I mean, they've done that, but why would they do it when there's nothing to gain in terms of appearance from? Why would they do that? They wouldn't do that. They need all that stuff. So what that says to me is that somebody is attacking them, but they're attacking them on the covert. So what this also means is that people who are listening or may and may not be listening, who are a part of stuff like that, this means that you are no longer safe. This means that you are no longer in a situation where people are not aware of where you at. Like I said, I met the daughter of the guy, one of the guys, fire marshals, who's setting up the underground, the sprinkler system for all of them, or at least the ones in New York. You know? But these are the things that a lot of people who may be down with this stuff in their families and stuff, who may be Caucasian or in positions of influence, are not. That's why, like, with this whole thing with this chick with this baby, you know, always bless a child coming into the world, but the way that you've done it has already shown it to be some sort of moonchild ritual, because the date that they're giving everybody is not the date the child was born. I think the child was born maybe 6 days before that, 6-7 days before that. But I'm not of the opinion that she physically gave birth to that child. And neither was she. But, you know what I'm saying? She would never let us know. And the only reason why we give a damn is because people place so much emphasis on this, what this chick's doing, when all she does is exploit herself. Just like she exploited the baby with the whole, you know, dropping the microphone and screaming and all that. It's like, you don't do that when you're pregnant. I've been around pregnant women. I've seen all of my children born. I've been present for all of them. And leading up to that, when you're really pregnant, you are not screaming like that on stage. You are not, you know what I'm saying? Especially no black women. But, again, this is just observations that I'm making based upon the pantomimes that are being put out there by this entity. All this entity was once a bait, is really just a visual distraction to occupy a certain sector of consciousness within all of us who do not or do identify with that archetype. Yet the archetype is the black woman. But in the action, what we're seeing is what happens when you are in a place where you have to play a role in which the lines between reality and fantasy are so blurred that you don't even know if you are what you think you are. And everyone goes through this, but when you're thrust in a situation where everyone in the world is putting their judgment or lack thereof on you, you become the inheritor of that energy. Depending on how you fortify yourself will depend on how much that will affect you, and in turn how much you can be affected. This is why at this period in time, visualization and astral or resonant projection is very important. There was a report put out by a guy named, scientist named, what was this guy? J. Alfred, and he said that DNA exists at a frequency of 750 megahertz, meaning that the frequency of deoxynucleic acid is 750 megahertz. So in that, they're saying that means that your DNA, your literal physical self, is attuned at a frequency that can be influenced. This then means that the DNA, which is the structural program of the Creator's operating program of everything, right, is created in such a way that it can self-perpetuate. So we can replicate, reproduce, genetically alter, spiritually ascend, not ascend, delve into the deep, whatever. We can do whatever. But it's all been brought down to a form of what they call gene engineering that allows them to slow down the process enough to find ways to map and isolate specific genome phenotypes that allow them to attach carrier waves onto the biochemical frequency of you. So the same way they can inject you with something, the same way they can project a sound or an energy towards you, and your body absorbs it the same way you would as if you internally was forced to take a pill or something like that. One of these genes is they're starting to isolate now which genes deal with certain violent behavior, and that certain people don't have certain genes that produce the gene that allows you to become violent like that. So what they're saying then is that they have the ability now to go into your genetic structure and take out a H3 or a H5 or a H3 or H4 gene out of you, which then takes the potential away from you in the future to do violence or be violent. So you see, this leads always to greater implications that can be extrapolated due to the fact that there is no real regulatory force for their agenda, because the ultimate agenda is to slow down the genetic bioluminescent energy that exists within all of us, that is simultaneously functioning on such a frequency that it corresponds to all the different versions of yourself and the earth and the people in it, all simultaneously. you know? So specifically speaking, again, now is the time when things like the projection of one astrally or the projection of one in a super physical state is good because it allows you to look beyond the basic aspects of yourself and look to yourself as something new. Like, we don't celebrate the regeneration process that we go through every 7 years because we don't really notice it. Yet, if it didn't happen, you would notice it. You know what I'm saying? And that's what sometimes onsets what people refer to as dis-ease. These are maladies that the body brings on to bring the consciousness into a certain view of where the body program has gotten to up to that point. So, like I said, moonshot rituals aside, these things that, quote-unquote, celebrities, which is really the new monarchy for people to be consumed with, is really just a backward, bastardized version of these old grudges and old beefs that have been persisting since our consciousness came in. But we are the first generation, multi-generation, to be able to be awakened with a certain frequency of consciousness, the way that we can assimilate all of these different quote-unquote ideologies or philosophies and still have our own opinion. Those of us that can still discern their own opinion from the opinion of whatever group or whatever they're a part of is unprecedented. You know, there used to be, if you was a farmer, like think about your parents and your parents' parents and your parents' 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 generation. These are people who did something for their whole life. Who, if they was a farmer, they was a farmer for their whole life. If they was a welder, they was a welder for their whole life. If they ran moonshine, if they whatever, they did that for their entire life. Can you imagine that? You can't even imagine that. You can't even imagine doing one thing for as long as you live, other than, you know, the basic things, eating, sleeping, you know, family, procreating, stuff like that. But in terms of an occupation, and then not have no outlet. Like the only outlet you might have is like, you know what I mean? Like pitching corn or you know, barbecuing or something. But the scary thing is that there are a huge percentage of the population that's living like that right now. Right now. Destitute. But have a job. Well, we, like, think about that. In the 70s, those people who was, like, kind of like young men or teenagers into adulthood during that time, you could have two cribs. You could have two apartments where you was paying $300, $600 for both. $300 for one, $300 for the other. Where one is, like, 2 bedrooms, the other, like, 3 bedrooms. And hold them down with one job and have a car and eat and be able to go out and buy weed and whatever you want to do. Now, you can't hold down one apartment with one job. You can have 2 jobs and not be able to hold down one apartment. That is not progress. That is societal decline. When you look at things from a social engineering perspective, that means that the civilization is on a decline. The more militarized the civilization becomes, the more on the decline it is. That's why China started to switch itself up. How is it that China, who did Tiananmen Square, they wiped that whole event out of the consciousness of their people? Their people don't even remember that shit happened. That's how ill they are with their control over there. So how is it that them people who will eat anything, where you could go over there and have a baby, where you could eat a baby, you understand? not like they go get a baby and cut it up in front of you, but they have relationships with abortion clinics and stuff like that. And they'll take babies and make delicacies and stuff out of them, like foie gras. So this is what I'm saying. Like, they got a whole nother system up there. So how is it that these people, who some of the most seem like the most craziest, right? And again, I'm really talking about the policies of the government and what is instituted over the Chinese people, not necessarily the Chinese people. I'm talking about the elite within their so-called governmental, hierarchy, whatever. How is it that those people be so depraved, but then they be the number one advocates now for human rights? They're the ones that's trying to find ways to modernize their sweatshops. They're going to close it down, but they're going to find a way to make it more economically and environmentally viable, because they was having things where they had done so much negative stuff to the environment where they had dust bowl storms, where they had huge orange clouds that was just occupying thousands of miles in the city. You got to walk around like a gas mask suit, stuff like that. And again, people act like China, the Chinese government, these people are not communists. These are the people that's upholding the communist thing in hard, other than the North Koreans and the Russians. The United States then destabilized and got rid of everybody else that was on that. And so here in America, when we were going through things like black nationalism and coming into, Pan-Africanism, that was the set up to get away from, or the reroute that we had to do to start to deal with what happened in terms of the destruction of the actual civil rights movement with the killing of Dr. King. So all of these events are marked with ceremonial or ritual killings that become part of the embedded psychic program that goes into the social program of what the country is going to be in the future. So we are just living out an aspect of someone else's, physically I'm talking about, living out aspects of someone else's reality. Because maybe in your reality, the streets wouldn't be block-shaped. Maybe they'd be circle-shaped. Or maybe they'd be triangle-shaped. Or maybe they'd be hexagon-shaped. Or maybe the buildings would have no shape. We're at the stage where we have to start to think outside of the boundaries that we've set up in our own minds to keep us from achieving the greatness that we know we're supposed to have. When we came up or was coming up, everything, it's almost like when you came conscious, everything was about what you was not going to do anymore. You notice that? Like, I'm not going to be down with that. I'm not going to eat that. I'm not going to wear that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to. That's not consciousness. But that's the consciousness that we have to the point that we get to another point where we realize that that's a limitation. Because usually when we first come into this, we don't really understand or know certain things. So we don't necessarily know people want to look like they don't know what they're talking about. However, if you got to be the fool in order to gain the wisdom, So it's like when I first got knowledge of self, I had a nose ring. And the God, Raquan Allah, peace to him, wherever he's at, from the P-Line, we were going to him to get 120. For those people who know what that is, that's the student enrollment and the supreme alphabet and the supreme math of the and the English C lesson of the Nation of Gods and Earths, peace to the gods and earth. And when I was there, we was building, and he was putting me on stuff, and then he looked at me, and he's like, well, you're doing this knowledge, you can't be on some nose ring shit. I was like, word? I was like, well, what's wrong with it? He's like, well, me personally, he said, well, me personally, like, it was like a weed leaf. He's like, well, me personally, I don't really think men should have that. He said, but on a historical tip, that's what the nose ring and the earring is what associated those of us in the family that was practicing black-on-black slavery, not only enslaving Caucasians, but enslaving black people as well. Nose ring, the nose ring and stuff like that was on that. So we see certain coats of arms with black heads, and they got that. He said, so that could mean then that is an aspect that shows that you may have that within your lineage. You know what I'm saying? So I thought about it, and I took it out. Not because I want to impress my teacher, who really was my teacher. He was just a elder god, because he was maybe, I was, 19? So he was maybe like 25 or whatever. So in that, he was basically just passing on some knowledge somebody gave him, was what he's supposed to do. But in that, the fact that he gave me the knowledge, but in a way that made me see something beyond that. Because I was like, wow, I never saw a picture of a black man with a nose like that. This is before I seen any pictures about Moors and all of that. So I say that to say that there's something that we have lost in our community, I think, in which we don't necessarily know how to really take criticism. But I also think some of us don't know how to give it either. You know what I'm saying? Because it's also how you coming at people. You know what I'm saying? And how you relate to them, how you trying to correct them. It used to be, if you didn't get the 120 right in the parliament, you get beat down, you know? And that created a generation or a couple of generations in which brothers had that, and still do have it on tap, like boom, boom, boom. But it's not also like that. But, this was also a time I didn't really see any, Caucasian people, rocking, universal flags, like I have seen now, So again, this ain't a reflection on the nation per se, but it's a reflect on the change and the amalgamation, the grafting process that takes 600 years to get back into the original man. That's where we in right now. Because it's an escape route. Remember, they are trying to find somewhere else to go to escape their karma, and they can't do it. They thought they could get into the inner earth and the bases that they've been building since the 50s. Oops, can't do that now because all their bases is irradiated. And what's worse, they got so many enemies and so many people, they don't even know who did it. That's an attack on American soil, son, under it. And they don't even really know who did it. So what they do is they put out there on the YouTube and stuff like that it happened, and put fit as a feeler to see who comments and who says what about it, to kind of give them an inkling as to who's down and who's not. So think about that now. They're now in this situation where they got to put out real shit that actually happened to them, but put it out like it's fake, and then see if they get a real response from it. What kind of world, what kind of government is that? What kind of people are we talking about, man? That's not even, like, I get it, but that's not how you're supposed to run a society, man. You know what I'm saying? Like, Rome was ran better than that. At least when they went totally draconian, it was about the Caesar. It was up to him. Whatever he decided to do, whatever. If he want to order the whole population to death, he could do that. That's how willing the enemy is willing to take what it is they have took. They are willing to not exist to rule. You understand? they are willing not to exist in order to rule. How many people want power that bad? How many people need to make all the records they want, but how many people want it so bad that they're willing not even to be here to get it? None of us, because we got a soul. So we know we came here to have a human experience, and we don't want our whole human experience to be about murder and killing all the time. But half of the experience that you're getting is coming from the TV, and that's only pumping. Murders every day. Think about how many times from the time that you started watching TV, you didn't see somebody or heard somebody get killed on it. Think about how many bodies you didn't see. You know what I'm saying? Of course you be desensitized when you see it happening in real life. Because they've already got it to the point where people can't discern one from the other. So this is an auspicious time to be able to learn how to trust the intuitive nature within and learn the origin of how these things came into being. Because like I was illustrating earlier with the whole Arabic Nazi thing, that's just the Arabic aspect of it. There's an African aspect of it, too, that gets into the assassination of Patrice Lumumba as the origin of it and culminates with the genocidal thing that went down in Rwanda between the Tutsis and the Hutus, which, again, psychologically exploited by the CIA based upon a leftover debt left from King Leopold. So psychologically, what do? They kidnap these young African soldiers, little boys, little girls. They raise them up military, rape them, do whatever they do to them. Then they put a fez on them and then put them out there and say, okay, now you're going to be my policeman. They don't know. They don't even remember what the fez represent, because that's not even the typical, the headdress of the people who lived in that region. But what they're doing is they're trying to poison the universal image of that ex-alpha as a means to block the spiritual resonance that goes along with the psychic empowerment that comes when you understand what your culture represents to you physically, when you adorn yourself with aspects of that. So, of course, they'll let them wear feathers when they didn't know. See what I'm saying? Like a lot of people don't know. When you see some African brothers and they be like in the hood or whatever, and they be walking, they be in all light blue. They be like in light blue, and they be having like them white shoes. Those are bays. Those are bays and days. But they ain't gonna tell you that, because you don't speak Wolof. You don't speak Igbo. You don't speak none of that. You see what I'm saying? So we have gotten to the point where everybody in the world has now feasted on every aspect of the culture that you have provided the world since you have incarnated in a physical, non-physical being. And you are now at the point where there's nothing left for them to feed on from you. So the only thing left for them to do now is become you. It's literally access you through your soul. It's not about your body. It's not about your land. It's not about none of that no more. Now it's about your soul, them seducing you to give your soul to them. And the proverbial them is the proverbial they. And the they is anybody and anything in your life that's contributing to you being less of yourself. Whether it is to maintain a certain situation, to keep airs going, to not hurt someone's feelings. Like, these are the things that are keeping us from being able to just astrally project in a situation, just at will. You can do that. How many times were you in school and you just drift off and you just have a whole nother daydream doing some whole other shit, and then they call your name and bring you right back into your body? It happens mad times, because as we get put through the process, they teach us to stop doing that, to be more in the present, be in the now. And that's cool. But your now is a simultaneous aspect of the when, where, and how, all at once. So your now is the past, present, and the future simultaneously. Your now is when you choose to activate whatever aspect of your consciousness you have not activated yet. So the end of their world has already happened. The end of their world started when you picked up that first book, or you heard that first brother or that first sister or that first elder tell you something that was like, you know what, you're right. You know what, these white folk is crazy. But you know what, these black folk crazy too. You know what I mean? It's a gradual thing. You rise into it. You rise into the bouquet like a fine wine. It's not something that you just going to have, and it's not something that somebody should want you to just make a decision about right then, because they got this group or they got this lecture popping and they're only going to be there for a certain amount of time, so you better get on it now. That's a pushy salesman. Nobody likes a pushy salesman. That's somebody that don't got time to talk to you. You know what I'm saying? So the people find themselves enslaved or not enslaved by the choices that they make. That's why all of these people that they call charlatans or whatever else exist. In order to make me have to show and prove with a certain level of consistency, with something, just to show that, again, I'm not. So I have to make certain choices just to show and prove, again, that I'm not, man, like that. But I did not get into consciousness to negate anything. You see what I'm saying? But again, when you get into it, you start up like, okay, I'm not going to eat this meat. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to talk. And that's cool, but the knot is what's creating the block. The knot is literally a knot tied, you know what I'm saying, that is constricting an even flow of energy through the rope. So it's an aspect in which instead of looking at it the glass half empty and half full, and deciding which one in the moment is more appropriate for your level of thirst, if you will. Maybe you don't want a half full glass. So if you look at the glass so maybe you're not that thirsty. So instead of pouring the water out, look at it as if there's less, or flip it. Isn't it? Either way, it's going to get drunk, and that's what I'm saying. Either way, your life is going to get lived. Because of you that's living it in this reality is simultaneously living it with the reality in the other one. Because there is no end. That's what they refer to Allah as the Lord of the worlds. The 99 names of Allah will correspond to the 99 elements in the periodic table, or the 99 names of the angels. And the Goetia. Goetia is spelled Goetia. So a lot of these wars, like I said, that's going on are really just wars over funding. So this whole, when they called the dude into the bunker in Denver, that was all based upon what I was talking about with the whole, you know, them hitting up the tunnels and stuff. So a lot of them tunnels is now irradiated. So now what? You can't go into them for another 100 years. So that's more money wasted. So that's another escape route they don't have. So they got to plan alternative routes. So one alternative route is to get as many black women to have their babies as possible. I'm not talking about love. I'm not talking about what people preferences is. Or I just like white women. What's wrong with that? Okay, whatever. I just like white men. What's wrong with that? Okay, whatever. I just like black women. What's wrong with that? Well, okay, whatever. I just like white women. What's wrong with that? Whatever. I'm not going to get into the psychological ramifications. That is something that you will come into understanding of as you engage in a relationship. I'm just saying that nowadays all that shit is used as a military application because they're not equaling out the societal aspect of that. They're not contributing to the racial aspect of that. It's not like Heidi Klum kids is going to the same school your kids going to. They ain't doing that. or even building a school or offering to build a school in the neighborhood, whatever. They ain't doing that. And still ain't asking her to do that. You see what I'm saying? Because white folk know once black folk get on, the only black folk they fuck with is black folk that fuck with white folk. That's not me being racist towards certain black people who do that. That's people who doing that. But again, when you say what's going on, people want to act like, oh, you just hating. But I grew up in an era where you couldn't say somebody else's rap, where you couldn't even use somebody else's verse in a chorus or something, or you get beat up, or worse. I've seen people get beat up. I've seen people rhyme books get took, ripped up at block parties. You know what I'm saying? Right over there on Farragut, by Wingate. You know what I'm saying? They just can't tell me. So, again, I came up in an era like that. So, somehow or another, it switched up where, you could do all of that and win. So, if that's the era that exists, then that's cool, and that's cool for those people who exhibit that behavior. But for people like us that don't, there has to be an alternative for us, right? It can't just be, we got to just eat that. Because if that's the case, why would we even be talking about any of this stuff? We gotta understand it as spiritual and all of that as we are, and as all of that. Like there's a subtle campaign right now against metaphysics. Like all of a sudden now metaphysics is the problem. You know what I'm saying? And it's not coming from the white people. It's coming from our community. You know what I'm saying? It's more about economics. Okay, great. I'm with that too. But then if it's not about that, then it's got to be about revolution. Okay, boom. And it's not about revolution. It's about health. Okay, cool. So we have everybody promoting a different agenda. But the overall consensus is that none of us are fully at the level where we don't need the support of each other. Yet if that support comes with an ultimatum or something else couched in it, I cannot accept. You see what I'm saying? But again, we live in the era, again, of haters, where people try to poison you to other people before they even meet you. You understand? Like it's deep, yo. Shout out to Brother Amun, brother from New York. He's out here. And it's deep, man. It's like we see so many aspects of this coming to bear that we have to allow ourselves the luxury sometimes of focusing on what really matters. You know what I'm saying? This full moon in Cancer is going to bring out a lot of underlying emotion, that once starts is just going to be like a flood. So don't be surprised if you see like a flood or like a wave, a tidal wave or something like that pop up somewhere, because it's full moon in Cancer. It's very about getting things cleared away for the deluge. The deluge is when the waters recede and things start to grow. The ancient Tumwankan, a.k.a. Olmecs, used to do a supplication ritual to bring about the black earth, because the black earth was the truest earth, and that was where the first ones, the first father, descended from. They said it was the cloak that covered first father's bones. So again, telling us again, we original people, we black, we proud, we all of this. Yet in the era again we live in now, all of that is predicated upon what aspect of the consciousness you done came into through. Yet, because there's a certain mode of behavior that attached to each, there's a way for us to navigate how to be amongst each other and communicate if we give ourselves a chance to do that. So we have made strides, obviously. There's I saw somebody brother sent me the thing on all of the mayors, one of them being Rahm Emanuel, which is very interesting. Rahm Emanuel and them signing off on Moorish American Week or Noble Drew Ali Day or whatever, which is real ill, because then that means that with that proclamation, if done correctly, the Moors can start to have parades all over the country every year. You know what I mean? That's the next step. So I hope that there's some sort of committee or something or somewhere where this can exist. If so, please put me on so I can promote it, tell people about it. And that's something that's really, really good, you know, regardless to whatever things may be behind the scenes with that, not necessarily with the Moors who made that happen, of course, but from people like Rahm Emanuel. You know what I'm saying? You know what I mean? You got to be careful. But, because, you know, he's Mossad. Keep it real. That's just what it is. And Miss Pops' brother. That's what it is. So, as the Prophet would say, we must always stay vigilant if we are to uplift all of humanity. So I'm just saying, in that, though, kudos, support, congratulations, and it's really a good thing. Also, those documents, that actual copy or authentic copy of that document or a copy of that document printed on, let's say, 100% cotton paper and is evidence, again, to show that the United States government is full awareness and has recognized the rights of original people. This document those copies of those proclamations can be added with that HJR 75 that was already put down in 1933. That adds on to that, which then adds more credibility to the ancient original people, whether they refer to themselves as Moors or Tamar Khan or whatever they want to call themselves, Zulu, Kemetic Moors, whatever. This is evidence now that people can have in their paperwork to say that, no, this nationality thing that I'm a part of exists, and governors of your federal state have acknowledged it. We got a day, nigga. You know what I'm saying? So that's great. Like I said, the next step is the parade. From the parade, the next step is the museum. From the museum, the next step, you know what I'm saying? This is how governments use little things like that to reconstitute themselves. You know what I mean? And it affects all of us, whether you're a Moor or not, whether you like the Moors or not, whether you consider yourself a Moor but not black, but a free Moor that's not white and that's white, whatever. It still affects you. If you're 85, that still affects you. Think about this. You've never seen a Moor before, never knew nothing. Then one day somebody tell you it's Moorish America Day and you see a bunch of Moors dressed in regalia walking down the street on horses and shit. As a black person, you just came from pitching on the corner with a blunt in your hand. Can you imagine? Like that's inspiring. But how come that's not on TV? How come that's not on CNN? How come that's not on Fox? How come I got to see it on the internet? How come it's not on regular TV? It's news, right? No, it's selective news. That's called selective journalism. That's what the movie The Green Hornet was about. If you see that movie. It's all about what they call yellow journalism. You could look that up. So, yeah, look out for this Iranian embargo thing. That's really not a good look. Look out for some sort of, like, waves, tidal waves, or, like, little flooding. You know, cancer periods are lush with that. You know, or full moons and cancers, I should say. You know. But then we also in Janus. So this is a time to listen to the dualistic inferences in people's speech, in people's talk, and how they relate to one another. You know, this is also where you'll be seeing like movies with like the same guy but his twin, or like videos with the same artist but it's like two of them and fighting each other or getting together. All of this is about having eyes in the back of your head, or in a sense having one eye. You know? So definitely look out for that. Also look out for them to get behind this new thing. They got to resettle the debt again. Every, month and a half, they got to go back in and try to extend the government because the government ceased to exist a couple of times, but the last time was when that whole banking debacle thing went down. That was really the end of that cycle for them. So it's not really to be continued too much after that. So in that now, they're transferring their issues now to these other people out here. Like I said, the Arabic Nazi factions that was set up are now the ones that's terrorizing and hanging black people and lynching black people and crucifying them in Libya right now. Also, the African aspect that we'll get into next Monday, the African Nazi Convention. Because remember, they had different corps, And at the fall of the Ottomans, when the British came in, the ally with the Ottomans was the Prussians, or the Germans, which led to World War I in terms of the Crimean War. And again, that whole war basically killed off all of the black, or a lot of the black indigenous people that was there, that had remained there or came back after the destruction of the beginning of the war between the ancients and the moderns. That started when the wild Neanderthal Germanians ceased to recognize the Holy Roman Emperors or the Moors as their overlords. We're going to talk about that in the class that we're going to have starting this Wednesday. It's a beginner's class for vets too. You know what I'm saying? There may be some stuff in it that you'll definitely be interested in. And like I said, we need to create the systems in our community, I believe, that should instill and keep an accurate record of how we got together. You know what I mean? How we started. Not just us in this situation, but this aspect of our consciousness as original people. Because this is, again, the first time in history, you know what I'm saying, where people are openly talking about stuff of subtle natures that 10 years ago they was denying. Even though sometimes they still deny it, they still put it in your face. They're still showing you that they still respect it enough to present it to you. Because they can't lie to you about it no more, so they got to put their spin on it. So they'll watch a DVD of me or whoever else, and then you'll see it on the History Channel. But because I don't own a network like Oprah, people hear me talk about it like, oh, that's just some nigga with feathers and locks talking black power shit. Why? Because subconsciously, people have been put off to young black men or black men, period, given certain degree of knowledge that's outside of the parameters of Western aspects due to things like the dude from A Living Color. Remember he was in jail? He was talking all that shit, but he was totally not making sense. And because of the minstralism of some of the fiascos that have gone down, it's easy to be disavowed, But disavowalment doesn't mean that the origin of the thing didn't begin at some point. And this is where we are, So definitely, those people want to holler at me and want to get in. It's going to be great. Email me at houseofl@hotmail.com. That's HOUSEOFEL@hotmail.com. You could also check out our website, www.aseerthejuketeers.com. Definitely please check out Assad's joint too, www.sagassad.com, as well as Lexus Tyler. Please check out the Queen material. It's very, very informative, very, very enlightening, you know. And also, I'm an advocate, like, when we have unresolved issues or whoever has issues with people and whatever, like, a lot of stuff got to just be put under the bridge, man. And not necessarily like people got to mess with each other, but it got to be put to a point where people is not so transfixed on little dramas and ego conflicts that really have nothing to do with the work, man. It's just that we also have to be men and women and be honest if, you know, we're in situations where, you know, you may not like somebody. You may not be in that. That don't mean that you got to be friends with them. That don't mean that you got to stay around them. And it just means that if you're in a situation and we're working towards a certain goal, so long as it don't get too out of hand, let's strive to just do that, you know. Because there's some of us that are very, very powerful and can galvanize, you know. Yet it's always the intent, guys. It's always the intent. How you start something is how it's going to end up. If there was something that you saw in the beginning of that relationship, then it's something you got to remember, and it don't go away. Something's up, man, you know. So as we are striving to be balanced, the more we forgive and move on, the more lighter our soul becomes and the more we're able to do things that we didn't think we could do. Because the things that was holding us down are actually things that we have not reconciled within ourselves. So if you are in your life and you feel that you have enemies, for instance, then you need to forgive those enemies and deal with them accordingly. But whatever the outcome, always know that sometimes people will become those things in your life due to you taking your light from them. And that we as original people don't give ourselves enough credit for what it is to produce and put in the world. And that the only way that can change is if we start doing that with ourselves now. That means understand what it is you do and do that as best as you can. And don't let nobody tell you that you don't do it well if you know that you're giving your best every day to do it. Whether it's a man, a woman, a father, a pastor, a mother, a grandmother, an aunt, an uncle, whoever it is. These are the people that's manifesting in your life to stop you from doing what you're supposed to do. But it's not to stop you from doing what you're supposed to do now. It's to stop you from what you're going to do. It's never about, because they know your potential, especially with the haters that were your friends and the people supposed to be a fan. They know potentially. And they knew back then when they saw you exhibit what you could exhibit that you was different from them. And so they did things in your life to talk to you a certain way, to always make you doubt that you could manifest it the way that you wanted to. And you got them in every color, in every family, in every country. They all doing the same shit because they all come from they cut from the same cloth. You just think they different. You just think you're dealing with different people. You're not. You're attracting the same situation. It's not necessarily you bringing that in because you're not evolving and raising your vibration to a certain degree. That may be true for certain people, but that's not the absolute for everybody. Sometimes you've raised your vibration so high that the parasitic nature within the other individuals becomes so frenzied that they have to find a way to be up under you or around you. And they'll do anything to do it. And because you don't give yourself enough credit for what it is you are and what it is you possess and what it is you contribute to the world, you're just letting it go. It's not cool, man. Be who you want to be and who you are. Whoever you see yourself as, be that. Because if you're not that, you're going to find out sooner than later. Trust. You can stare at me all day. I can stare at you all day. But I will always be me, and you will always, always, always be you. So there has to be an existence in where the perceiver, the perception, and the perceived all exist. That's in the mind's eye. That's the part of you that they want. That's the part of you that's caught up, or they want to get caught up in the material aspect of the world and put little distractions, little things out there to give you hope that maybe some of these people see things like you. Like Kanye West put out something with Kanye West talking about how he's gonna start a foundation and people can just holler at him and do whatever. Nigga, until I see you at a Save Me lecture, until I see you at a Light of Africa Jewel Poofum lecture, nigga, like it's all talk, man. But because there's a lot of people who want to be down with people like that. They want to be down with these niggas, man. No, I'm going in on how superficial the actual movement has manifested, where people think that because this guy Kanye West will put out something like he wants people to send him information and like put him on and shit like that, like that somehow shows that he's trying to be more conscious. Like, those are the examples of what I'm saying, how we can get, sometimes we forgive the wrong shit. You know what I mean? We get caught up in the wrong aspect of that, and that's not really what it's about, because really it's beyond him. I'm just using him as an example because that's a universal image archetype of quote-unquote black success that everybody could say, okay, something about. But either way, he still did or had some sort of talent to get to that point where we can comment on it or something. So that means he did something. You see what I'm saying? You are held accountable for the things you do, not for what people say about you, not for what people heard about you, not for what people think you about, but from what you do. If you did not see me do it or you did not hear it from me, then it's all conjecture concerning me or my family or whatever it is. And my thing is, you can ask me. Anybody can ask me whatever, man. I'm like that. You can ask me whatever. If I know, I will tell you, and if I don't know, I'll try to find out. So in that, it's all on the table. You know what I'm saying? It's for all of us to be able to contribute what it is we can do, whatever that is. It don't have to be necessarily picking up a gun or trying to flip on a pig or something like that, because that's what they want. They flipped the ritual on this shit so hard that this dude done killed two different international figures and started a war. He started another war and got the Peace Prize in the same presidency. Come on, man. The fix is in. So because we know we're ahead of the game, because like they say, and Frank Herbert said in Dune, the first step in evading a trap is knowing that it exists. So we know that the trap is Western society, but what we know is that we exist, and it coexists or is seeking to subsist off of us. Therefore, we're the ones with the power. So all we got to do is find what it is we do best and actualize that in a way in which we all can benefit. And it's not hard. So, again, anybody wants to holler at us about the new class coming up on this Wednesday, please email me at houseofl@hotmail.com. Thank you guys for coming in and listening to me go in on these different topics, you know. Also, thank you for participating in your own ascension and realization. And inshallah, we'll speak to you guys next Monday where we get into the whole African Nazi thing. All right? And with that, we say peace, as well as some other stuff.